This is Axel Foley, a Detroit police officer who was quite familiar with the residents there. He arrived at the Detroit hockey stadium and looked very serious watching the match, while his friend Mike, who was watching with him, had quite a lot of chatter. He did that because he admired Axel. For him, Axel was his inspiration to become a police officer because he was a charismatic figure. He was very happy when Axel invited him to watch hockey together. But it turned out that Axel invited him not only to relax to watch hockey, but to catch a criminal at the stadium called Junior. Axel was forbidden to investigate Junior, so he invited Mike, so that Mike would be the one who caught him and automatically got a good reputation for catching the man. They went downstairs to arrest Junior, but Junior said that he had repented and never committed a crime again. At this moment, Axel saw something very suspicious in the locker room and immediately sneaked into there. Inside, he found several armed criminals and people who were hostages. Seeing this, Axel intervened and took one of the criminals hostage after taking his gun. Axel pointed the gun at the criminal and threatened the other criminal to lower the weapon. Unexpectedly, the police who were hostages there stood up and attacked Axel. The criminals managed to escape and were then chased by Axel and Mike. Seeing the criminals jumped over the fence and wanted to escape on a quad bike, Axel and Mike had to look for another vehicle. So they took a snowplow to chase them. Unfortunately, this chase caused costly damage to the city. The next day, Axel reported to the police station about the criminals and was given applause by his friends, although it turned out that the deputy police chief named Jeffrey was not happy with his action. Jeffrey was ousted by the police commissioner because of the chaos in the city. According to Jeffrey, Axel's behavior was not tolerable. This kind of action could lead to the removal of his badge. Jeffrey also said that he had applied for retirement to defend Axel, meaning that no one would be there to defend, protect, and clarify all of Axel's actions in the future. He also said that he wanted to spend more time with his family, and he advised Axel to do the same thing, namely to spend time with Jane, his only daughter. Somewhere in Los Angeles, Jane, Axel's daughter, who was a lawyer, was about to meet a prisoner named Sam. She was a pro bono lawyer who was free of charge. She said that she wanted to help because, according to her, Sam was innocent and was just being framed. It was revealed that Sam was accused of the murder of a police officer. Not so long ago, Sam, who was smuggling drugs belonging to his uncle named Chelino, was accused of killing an officer named Copeland, who was undercover to arrest him. However, according to Sam, a car came and masked people came out to kill the policeman and accused him of the crime. In court, Sam was unable to defend himself from the many accusations since the evidence was very strong against him. However, Jane stood up and asked the investigator to re-examine the defendant. The defendant's lawyer was angry because this was the same as accusing the defendant of being a corrupt officer and shifted the focus of the case. But Jane was adamant about her position. She then asked her staff to investigate to see if any suspicious transactions could be used as evidence. But suddenly, when she was about to leave with her car, some masked criminals attacked her car. It turned out that she had become the target of masked criminals. They threatened Jane to withdraw from this case by hanging her car in the parking building. Jane's car was finally able to be lowered safely with the help of the police and the fire department. Jane was then visited by Billy Rosewood, a private detective who also investigated Sam's case. It was Billy who asked her to help with this case, but he asked her to step down from this case because it had become too dangerous. He didn't want to give Axel bad news if something happened to her, but because Axel and Jane's relationship wasn't very close, Jane asked so that Billy wouldn't tell Axel about this at all. Billy broke that promise and called Axel to tell him about Jane's condition. He told him that Jane was working on a quite dangerous case. After hanging up the phone, Billy continued his investigation at a port where he saw suspicious activity, but he got bad luck. Several armed men caught him. The next day, Axel arrived in Beverly Hills. He tried to call Billy but didn't get an answer, so he went to Billy's residence. In front of Billy's residence, he saw that the door had been broken into. Carefully, he went inside and found several people searching the place. He claimed himself as someone sent to supervise their work, even though there was some doubt at first. But thanks to Axel's cleverness, the two men believed that he was indeed their friend. Axel then secretly took a note belonging to Billy, which might be used to find him. Unfortunately, another man came in, and they found out about Axel. Axel took a nearby fire extinguisher and sprayed it at the people who had just entered and then ran away. So that he wouldn't be caught, he stole a traffic police car that was stopped nearby. The criminals tried to chase him. The chase once again caused massive damage to the city. Axel managed to survive the pursuit, but he was caught by the traffic officers whose car he had just stolen. He was brought to the station and was questioned by a detective named Bobby. Axel asked so he was allowed to call Taggart, the head of the Beverly Hills Police whom he knows, but Bobby forbade him. He wanted to know what Axel was doing at Billy Rosewood's residence. Axel tried to trick him by digging into his past. One of the things that Axel saw was the photo of Bobby as a pilot and used it to provoke Bobby, but Bobby was not easily provoked, and Axel's efforts here failed miserably. Feeling like he couldn't get out of there easily, Axel decided to call Jane. Finally, after Jane rejected his call several times, she answered the call, and Axel immediately told her that he had information about Billy Rosewood. Because of this, Jane immediately came to pick him up. Without further ado, Jane asked for information about Billy, but Axel just silently stared at his daughter who had grown up. Jane, who was uncomfortable, tried to brush off her father's words. Bobby and Jane apparently once had a relationship because they both became awkward when they met. Helped by Jane, Axel could finally meet Taggart, his old friend who was also the chief of the department, who then greeted Axel with a hug. Inside the office, he also met Grant, a police officer who led the anti-narcotics task force. From their chat, it was revealed that Copeland was Grant's subordinate. Grant said that he was very sure that Copeland was a good officer and couldn't possibly be involved in a crime. He was shocked when he found out that Jane, the person who tried to prove that Copeland was guilty, was Axel's daughter. After that, Axel convinced Jane to help him to look for evidence. Even though Jane was still annoyed with her father, in the end, she agreed to help, because this evidence could later be used to help her win her case. Soon, they arrived at the last place before Billy disappeared, namely an impound lot. Assisted by Jane, Axel managed to trick the guards so that they were allowed to see the vehicles there. They then found the last car used by Copeland before he died, and when they checked it, they found a hidden camera without an SD card in it. What's worse was that in the official police report, it was said that there were no hidden cameras in there. They couldn't stay for long because Axel realized someone was following them. He took the tracker on his car and attached it to the school bus. From there, he then saw who was following him. It turned out that those following them were the suspicious people who searched Billy's place. Axel and Jane then followed two suspicious people. They stopped at a private club called the Eastern. Initially, Axel tried his trick again by lying to the receptionist to be allowed in, but unfortunately, he couldn't convince the receptionist. Jane stepped in to help Axel convince the receptionist, and she was able to do it. As soon as they entered and went upstairs, they met Grant there. It was then revealed that the people who searched Billy Rosewood's office worked for Grant. According to Grant, his people were told to search Billy's place because Billy stole important evidence from the case, but Axel didn't believe it. For him, Grant was too luxurious for a police officer. Surely Grant wasn't one of the honest policemen, but because there wasn't anything Axel and Jane could do, they decided to leave. Even though Axel found a bright spot in this case, namely Grant's involvement, there was another thing that hadn't been solved yet, namely his relationship with Jane. They got into an argument on their way home. The next day, Jane was busy working when her assistant said an important client was waiting for her in the meeting room, but as soon as she came in, it turned out to be Axel, fully dressed in a neat suit. His arrival was certainly not without reason. It turned out that he had investigated the note he got in Billy Rosewood's office. The note had an address written on it, and he had visited that address. According to him, the security of the place was too tight for any house in Beverly Hills. Axel and Jane then went to meet Sam. They were very sure that there were things that Sam still hid from them, so they decided to meet Sam once again. But on the way to meet Sam, they were attacked. Fortunately, Bobby, who turned out to be following them, helped defeat the armed criminals. Bobby, Axel, and Jane returned to the Beverly Hills police station and were scolded by Taggart for causing chaos on the streets. Axel revealed the evidence he had found that there was suspicion that Grant and Copeland were involved in this case. Taggart felt that Axel was too presumptuous in accusing the police without any evidence, so he kicked him out. He also called Bobby and held his badge so that he wouldn't get involved in this case. Outside, Jane waited worriedly. Axel tried to convince Jane that with the increasing danger threatening them, it was clearer that they were on the right track. Soon after, Bobby came to tell them that he would help because he was also being relieved of his duties. Without waiting any longer, the three of them continued their investigation. Jane received information that the house Billy was investigating was bought by a mysterious company. The company turned out to have carried out many luxurious houses selling over the last 5 years, and Bobby concluded that this was the cartel's way of laundering money. Axel then planned to infiltrate the house by pretending to buy the house next to it. Then when he got the chance, he would jump into the house. To make an appointment to look at the house, Axel knew who he should contact, and it was Serge. Serge took Axel, Jane, and Bobby to a property agent he knew, and they looked at the house and pretended to be interested in the house. When the property agent was busy showing off the house to Jane and Bobby, Axel sneaked into the house next door. He went to the garage and found a car that had scratches from a collision. He was sure that the scratches from the collision were obtained from hitting Copeland's car. He couldn't stay for long because he just realized there was CCTV in the garage. Axel then returned and gave the others the evidence he got, a photo of a scratched car and a signal jamming device. For Jane, this was enough to be initial evidence at trial to free Sam. But of course, for Axel, this wasn't enough. They had to get the SD card Billy had. Jane seemed to feel uncomfortable with this discussion. She said that her father was being selfish because his actions could harm them further. Jane accused him of never really caring about her. Axel and Bobby continue their investigation by meeting Shalino, the person who asked Sam to be a courier for the drugs. Initially, Shalino didn't want to help them because they were both officers, but they convinced Shalino that they could work together to defeat Grant and free Sam. Finally, Shalino told them the location of the port where Grant usually smuggled drugs. It turned out that Axel's action was caught on CCTV. The guard in the house immediately gave the information to Grant. Grant felt that he had to intervene directly to stop Axel, so when Axel and Bobby left Shalino's place, Grant's troops were ready to arrest them. Grant claimed that he found drugs in Axel's car. This was of course Grant's trap, but Axel and Bobby couldn't avoid it and were caught. Grant arrested Axel and took him to the anti-narcotics office. Axel racked his brain to find a way to escape from the place. He released his hands from the handcuffs and then opened the partition to the ceiling. When Grant entered the room, he was very shocked to see that Axel was no longer in there. He saw that the handcuffs had come off and the ceiling partition was open, so he immediately checked the ceiling, but it turned out that Axel did not escape through the ventilation hole. He instead hid under the table and waited for the opportunity to attack Grant. Axel immediately came out and freed Bobby. The two of them then sneaked out of the police station, but unfortunately, the other police realized that they had escaped. The siren sounded and all the police prepared to catch them. Axel led Bobby to escape through the roof of the building. He had planned to escape by helicopter because he knew Bobby was a former pilot. But when they wanted to leave, Bobby seemed nervous and panicked. Grant realized that Axel escaped through the roof, so he ordered his men to prepare a chase. It turned out that the reason Bobby was nervous was that he had previously been kicked out of the helicopter piloting team because he once crashed a helicopter into a private jet. This incident traumatized him and he was no longer able to fly the helicopter. Knowing this, Axel panicked. The helicopter didn't fly well, making Grant unable to track them using a radar. As a result, Grant ordered his men to chase with a car. Without being able to control it, the helicopter fell onto a rich man's golf course. So that Axel wouldn't be prosecuted, he immediately lied that there was a woman who was still trapped inside the helicopter. And when the rich man was not looking, Axel and Bobby stole the golf cart. The news of Axel and Bobby's arrest and their escape reached Jane's ears. Taggart admitted that they had to issue a wanted list for them. But this made Jane even more worried that something bad would happen to her father, and she was not ready to say goodbye to him yet. Seeing this, Taggart then said that Axel actually really cared about her. It was just he didn't know how to express it. Axel and Bobby arrived at the port they were told about by Cellino. They then sneaked around trying to find information and finally found Billy Rosewood, who was being locked in a warehouse. Without much ado, they ambushed the place and defeated the person guarding the warehouse. Axel immediately hijacked a truck containing drugs to escape from the port. On their way to escape, Axel called Jane to tell her that they had found Billy and got the SD card, but unfortunately, it wasn't Jane who answered the phone but Grant, who had caught Jane and made her hostage, so that Axel would give him the SD card. Axel then stepped on the gas to Jane's location, which he tracked down with the help of his friend, Jeffrey, in Detroit. Of course, they needed help, but as Bobby said, the three of them were fugitives who drove a truck fully loaded with drugs, so there would not be help from the police. Axel then hit several police cars so that the cars would chase them, so that if something happened, the police could help. Axel crashed the truck into the house where Grant captured Jane. Without further ado, the armed guards strafed the truck. Axel and Bobby ran up the stairs while Billy protected them from the other guards. Billy, who faced the armed guards, had run out of ammunition, and this was when Taggart came with a shotgun to help Billy fight the cartel. Meanwhile, Jane, who was left alone, tried to free her hands from the handcuffs. She took a vase and hit the guard near her. She then took the guard's gun. At the same time, Axel was still breaking through the guards who seemed to have no end. Armed with a gun, he managed to shoot the guards and got closer to the room where Jane was being held. Because Jane had already left, Grant was the only one there, waiting for Axel. They faced each other and pointed guns. Grant saw that his men were ready to trap Axel, so he pretended to give up. And when his men were about to shoot Axel, Jane came and shot the man. When they were off guard, Grant took his gun and pointed it at Jane. Axel jumped to block the shot from Grant's gun. When Grant was ready to shoot a second time, Bobby appeared ready with his gun and shot Grant right in the head, killing him instantly. Shortly after, backup came to arrest the remaining cartel members while Axel was taken to the hospital. Axel was getting better, but seeing that the hospital food was not as delicious as usual, Axel ran away from the hospital and ordered food at a restaurant near the hospital. Knowing her father, Jane went to meet him at the restaurant. She then told his father that Grant and several cartels died at the scene of the crime while the judge would free Sam thanks to the evidence they had managed to collect. Axel then apologized to Jane for ignoring her all this time. Jane also apologized for not really paying attention to her father's feelings. In the end, their relationship got better.